Good morning, everyone. Good morning. We're going to get the day started. Welcome to day 3 of the Public Safety Symposium. Hopefully everyone had a good night. Not too good, but good enough to be here today, this morning. Okay, so to get us started today, I just wanted to kick things off. So my name is Ryan Perlongo. I work in the DCJS's Law Enforcement Strategic Assistance Unit, heading up our Evidence-Based Training and Innovation section. It's my pleasure to introduce our keynote speaker this morning, a distinguished figure in the world of crime prevention and policing, Jerry Ratcliffe. Jerry's career began with a decade of service as a police officer with the London Metropolitan Police, where he worked in intelligence and diplomatic protection. After an ice climbing accident, Jerry transitioned to academia, earning first-class honors degree and a PhD from the University of Nottingham. Today, Jerry is a professor in the Department of Criminal Justice at Temple University in Philadelphia and is widely recognized for his contributions in crime reduction and criminal intelligence strategy. He has worked with police agencies around the world and served in advisory roles with organizations like the FBI, the Philadelphia Police Department, and the International Association of Chiefs of Police. Additionally, Jerry has published over 90 research articles, 9 books, and hosts a Reducing Crime podcast, which features insightful conversations with key figures in policing and crime research. And while his biography is impressive on its own, the reason Jerry is here today is because of what he understands and advocates for. He's the strongest proponent I've ever met for building researcher-practitioner partnerships, contextualizing data through field work, and has been unafraid to call out and call to action criminal justice researchers who have not worked with members of law enforcement doing the work on the ground. His address this morning will focus on discussing implementation science's role in real-world practice and ensuring effective crime prevention methods are not just developed, but successfully implemented and sustained in organizations. So with that, please join me in welcoming Jerry Ratcliffe.
Good morning, ladies and gents. This is a weird room. I feel like I'm like a third-rate comedian at Las Vegas in a casino somewhere. So how's everybody doing? Yeah. Thank you very much. I appreciate everybody for coming out this morning. I know I saw a few of you at happy hour, so I hope you didn't. I mean, I know you overindulged. I saw you. So I wasn't sure what I was going to talk about, and I spoke to Ryan at the beginning and said, what do you want me to talk about? So he gave me the title. So I'm either thinking you're here because you wanted the free breakfast and good luck with the soup that is the oatmeal. I grew up in Scotland. I know what oatmeal and porridge looks like, and yeah. And or you actually read the title and you still fucking turned up. So I will talk a little bit about implementation science, but for those of you who read the title and thought, I'm still going to turn up to that at 8 o'clock in the morning, that's what I was expecting to find. And all I'm going to do is, just to start off, is I'm going to quote Jack Reacher and said, remember, you wanted this, okay? I did speak to Chuck Tyree yesterday. I said, it's a really difficult subject. It's 8 o'clock in the morning. You guys had happy hour yesterday. Can I take it, it's a deep subject. Can I take it a little bit lighter, a bit more relaxed? And like my last trip to the proctologist, he gave me the thumbs up. So we're going to take it easy. You probably saw from the introduction, I am at Temple University. It's in Philadelphia. For those of you who don't know where Philadelphia is, just keep going down I-95 until you get scared. So it's nice to be away here in Albany. Yeah, the birthplace, I discovered, of melancholy. So now I'm never getting invited back again. I'm from Philadelphia, for crying out loud, so you guys have got it good. If you're wondering, many people at universities introduce themselves by talking about the famous alumni that come from their institution. I was a visiting fellow at Cambridge University recently, and they have people like Isaac Newton and Albert Einstein have taught there. So I looked and did a bit of history in Temple University. Unfortunately, Temple University's most famous alumni are among history's most famous monsters. These are all legitimately true. Including in our alumni are There's Temple University. Amongst our famous alumni are serial killer Ted Bundy, serial rapist Bill Cosby, and worst of all, one half of Hall & Oates. I'm so sorry. and not even the singy half. Sorry about that, yeah. So I was asked, you're probably wondering, and yes, you are absolutely right, my accent is born and raised South Philadelphia. I grew up in Scotland. I have a Scottish accent, but Tony, we didn't have enough whiskey last night to bring it out. I ran away from home when I was 17. I clearly didn't understand juvenile teenage angst because I ran away from home and joined the police in London. I was a cadet for a year, joined the streets as far too young a police officer. Loved policing, always thought I was going to stay in the job, but I saw that everybody who was promoted had a college degree and I didn't. So I was going to do, part-time I was doing a degree in geography, and I used to like traveling, and I was ice climbing in the Scottish Highlands when I fell, and the laser pointer's not going to work because the screen's a little bit absorbent, but yeah, I fell in the mountains right there in the middle, and in my late 20s, that was the end of my policing career. So I did 11 years police service, but I have to say, the 11 years of police service was the best time of my life, which tells you something about the abject misery of the last quarter century in academia. I worked for a few years in Australia, teaching police intelligence in Australia. It's not an oxymoron. But the problem with Australia is that they just don't have enough crime. And I thought, where could I go to where there is loads of crime, where there's as much crime as I want? Every possible crime type is in high volume. So for the last 25 years or so, I've been in Philadelphia and having a splendid time there. Now, I have pursued an academic career. Many years ago, I wrote a book on the left-hand side called Intelligence-Led Policing. And I'm leading into this to tell you why I'm going to talk a little bit about a model in this book on the right-hand side. And the reason for that is they said to me, if you want to be promoted to full professor, you should write a theoretical, intellectual academic book. So I wrote this book called Intelligence-Led Policing. I'm not recommending it to you. It's got theoretical models and conceptual ideas. I mean, it's got 10 fucking pages of references. Do you remember that stuff? How many people went to college and your college professor would give you those academic journal articles to read? And you're like, oh man, this is rough. Now imagine 120 pages of that. So it was definitely written for academics. Unbeknown to me, a good friend, a deputy commissioner in the Philadelphia Police Department, put it on the promotion exam. If he'd asked me, I would have said, don't do that. This is not written for police. But no, he doesn't ask me, he doesn't tell me. So how do I find out? I'm doing a ride-along with Philly PD. It's about midnight. I'm in West Philadelphia. I'm at the scene of a homicide. I'm standing with a mate of mine who's a captain, and we're looking at this poor guy who's been shot point blank in the side of the head. And we're going, oh, but if you get shot in the side of the head, not a lot of blood. Surprising. And the sergeant walks up to me, and he goes, are you Ratcliffe? And I go, looking at him, don't think I owe him any money. And he goes, I go, yeah. And he just leans in and he goes, I had to read your fucking book. So, all right then, learned my lesson. So I wrote the book on the right-hand side. It's really small. It's like a paperback. And it's designed to be for people like yourselves, mid-senior level police leaders. Because if you think about what your policing career is, we get pretty good training at the academy. If you're lucky, at the end of your service, you might get to the FBI National Academy, but you do all the work in the middle, and your academy training teaches you largely not to get the police department sued. And by the time you're end of your career with a year or two left, and you're going to the National Academy and seminars and stuff like that, it's a little bit too late. The actual work for crime prevention, crime reduction gets done in the middle. This book was written for people like yourselves. I will say, was it a success? I don't know. I tried to write it in English. I can tell you who it's not popular with. It's really not popular with criminals, and I know this to be true because a good friend of mine had a copy. She drove down to Philadelphia for a meeting with the ATF field office, parked a car, and everything got stolen from her car, except the copy of the fucking book. She sent me the photograph. It's like, there we go. So car theft is a problem in Philadelphia unless you have a copy of this book. The model I use is this. This is the model that I've been working with for a few years now. For those of you, how many people, quick show of hands, there's a couple of moments of audience participation. You just have to wave your hand. How many people are familiar with the SARA model of problem-oriented policing? Okay, quite a few folk. If you're not, you'll probably come across it in promotion exams and stuff like that. It's been around for 30, 40 years. The problem is, it's, as it's been explained to me, a little bit too abstract. So for those of you who know it, you've got the scan analysis. This whole area over here to the right is the response side, and then you've got the assess the outcomes. And the reason being is that where we struggle is so often with response. So I'm actually adding a little thing called a mission statement, which I'll explain to you in a minute. And the response part is separated into nominating a strategy and deploying a strategy. Because nominating a strategy is important. What are we actually going to do? But then can you implement it? And that is a huge issue. How many people have read operational plans from bosses that you've had in the past and you've gone, yeah, that's never going to fucking happen? We've all been there. It's easy to put big, optimistic operational plans together. But the reality is that implementation is where most good ideas die. So in terms of putting this together, this model is designed to improve the decision-making around crime prevention. The challenge is, what it's up against is the usual way we do it. And we'd love to think that we go round through this kind of a process. But as analysts in the room will tell you, what we often do is identify a problem, and then we go, yeah, let's go, oh no, we'll just jump straight to that. And we skip all that thinking part of it. So this is the usual model that we go to. Unfortunately, it skips all the analysis. It skips thinking about really what are the plans that we have, what is the evidence behind the strategies that we're trying to do. And I know what you're thinking, well, at least we can assess our outcomes. No, we often don't do that either. What there's a tendency to do is just skip that part and go straight to, yeah, let's just celebrate our success, tea and medals all round. And that's still, to this day, unfortunately, what many police departments do. And the problem, therefore, lies in when we skip the analysis and we skip actively thinking about what are the objectives, what are the outcomes we want to change, what are our strategies that we're trying to take on, we end up with what an old friend of mine, Sir Dennis O'Connor in the top right-hand side there, calls schoolboy football. Ryan kindly mentioned it. I have a podcast called Reducing Crime. Comes out once a month. It's me chatting to people who are a lot smarter than me. So Dennis O'Connor worked in the same police district that I did, but he started before me. He started in 1968. And he describes, to this day, too much of policing as being schoolboy football. Now, he's British, so we're talking about soccer. But how many people have got kids or, know you've got kids? How many people are paying for kids? Just got to check, right? And have you ever seen them playing soccer at school? It's because it's popular now. Yeah. Seen kids playing soccer? Wherever the ball goes, I took this photograph in El Salvador, but basically wherever the ball goes, they go, right? And this is crime prevention as we run CompStat meetings. Yeah, imagine the ball's crime. The ball moves one place, and we'll send our little blue and red dots, the cops there, and then next month the ball goes somewhere else, and we all scurry over there. Schoolboy football. Not putting any strategic thought into it, not thinking about it, just cluster to the dots, and then cluster to the dots. I'm going to rewind this a little bit just to show it again. I just want to stress a couple of things. I took this video in California. I think we can all agree that pitch needs to be mown, don't we? It's pretty rough to play football there. Secondly, I don't think anybody is going to dispute that I just don't see the US men's team winning the World Cup anytime soon. And lastly, I do want to stress I was actually dating one of the mothers of those kids. I don't just randomly turn up at sports fields and video kids. Yeah. The judge was really specific. I should stop doing that. So here's the additional bits, and here's the additional pieces I want to get you. To give you. One of the first parts is this notion of what is exactly we're trying to do. I like to do a lot of ride-alongs, so I'm going to show you. This is some work I was doing in El Salvador. But a lot of the time, there's a lack of clarity around what is the goal of what we're trying to do. We're fairly clear about what the problem is. Oh, we have an increase in shootings, or we have a problem with vehicle theft. We're less clear about how we're going to get to a solution. And this sounds bizarre. We're less clear about what the solution is. So here's a little acronym, ROAM, that I'm going to give you, that I invite you to use as a way to help get people on board with the idea of getting everybody on the same page. And it asks, what is the response that we want to see in some important outcome? So what change or response do we want to see in a specific outcome? That's on the community side. This particular project was on people being murdered on buses. Yes, cheerful times in El Salvador. And on the policing side, with these cops over here, what activity are they going to do that triggers what crime reduction mechanism? What do I talk about a crime reduction mechanism is if you're running CompStat meetings or somebody comes to you and say, hey, we should do this, a good question to ask them is, why? Explain to me how doing that will achieve this outcome. Because figuring out the mechanism is really difficult. I've seen people say, hey, I saw you did some work in Philadelphia on foot patrol. And I went, yeah. Oh, we started doing foot patrol. Oh, great, what was the problem? Oh, we're getting a lot of subterfuge, kind of shoplifting of small items from big box retailers. Oh, great, are the foot patrols in the stores? I went, no. Well, how is foot patrol walking around outside going to stop shoplifting in the stores? A lack of clarity about the mechanism. So it's difficult to figure this all out. So what response do we want in what important outcome? And what activity will we do that triggers what crime reduction mechanism? And when I'm talking about outcomes, there's a tendency for us to focus in policing on, and I've been around, this is my 40th year involved in policing, we still have a tendency to focus on outputs. And what am I talking about? Well, first of all, start with inputs. Inputs are the things that you can most easily affect. Okay, so with inputs, that's where you can control where you spend your money, where you put your budget, if you are going to give people, assign extra overtime, or put more people in a squad. That's how we solve most problems in policing, isn't it? If in doubt, form a squad, right? Yeah, form a unit. And you know if you've got a really good unit if they have their own patch. Whew, once you've got a unit with their own patch, you're never getting rid of them. They may solve the problem, they may not. It doesn't matter. They've got their own patch. They are around for the rest of your service. They're not going anywhere. But that's where you can put your input, right? That's where you can have the most impact. Then you hope that those people will have some kind of outputs. They will produce some work, ideally more arrests or more investigations or more patrolling, right? You know, you've got to watch the monitoring of that, the implementation, but that's what you hope for. But is that what the public want? What the public actually want is, does that change outcomes that the public care about? Because if you screw this up, we can do a really good job of simply churning out more outputs and not really having an effect on outcomes. Here's a perfect example of it. If you want to stop cyclists cycling really fast down this little pathway here, this is a really good crime prevention tool. It's cheap, it's easy to install, you can install that in a weekend, it doesn't require any police resources, it doesn't cost a lot of money, it's community friendly, fantastic, can't go wrong with that. And you consider that, there we go, that is a success, right? That is a perfect output. Because did it achieve the actual problem? No. But you just know that somebody probably got promoted on the strength of getting that done, right? That's what happens when you focus on outputs and not outcomes. And we're guilty of it too. How many people have had some media briefing where you've all stood behind a table full of money and drugs and guns? Yeah, we've all had a few of those, haven't you? There's a few sheriffs, there's a few police chiefs, love this shit, right? By the way, if you're playing the game of who gets to stand behind the coolest table full of stuff you've confiscated, right? The competition, the goal you have got to set yourselves to is the police in Torino in Italy in 2019 who went and busted a white supremacist, yes, they had them in Italy, a white supremacist organization, and they found, I shit you not, a surface-to-air missile, fully functioning. Yeah. The explosive part of the warhead had been removed. The rest of it was fully functioning. Okay, that's what you, then you stand behind that and go, yeah, bring it. But coming back to this, well, there we go. I mean, we hope it works, right? But that's too often what we have a tendency to do. So we implement things, but we're not clear about what the outcome is that we're actually trying to affect. And that's the outcome the public care about. So I've done work with, did some work with an LAPD FBI gang task force, Operation Thumbs Down in South Central Los Angeles. Their metrics were, how many years can we get these guys? You know, how many years can the federal attorney get a sentence for these guys? And I'm going, do you think it made the neighborhood safer? Do you see the difference? We really pride ourselves on how much custodial sentences we might have, but can we actually show that the neighborhood was safer? So thinking about the outcome more than the outputs is kind of important. So that's the mission statements. That's Rome. So what response do we want in an important outcome? What activity and what mechanism? And if you're working on a team on a new project, ask everybody to do this independently. Write down what they say. You'd be surprised how, with the best will in the world, we're often slightly pulling in different directions. It's a good way to start just to see if everybody's on the same page together. In terms of thinking about nominating a strategy, we have a tendency to go, okay, what law enforcement solution are we bringing in? I try to give people checklists for all of each little stages. So the checklist for nominating a strategy is VIPER. It's not just about crime prevention or enforcement, but the first questions I ask, there's some evidence that if we can actually improve victim support, we improve the perception of police legitimacy in the eyes of the public. For every crime victim, they have family members and friends that they communicate to. And they always ask, what were the police like? If we can do a little bit, just a little bit extra on victim support, there's some evidence that we can improve wider public perception of police legitimacy. And that's not a bad thing to do in this post-George Floyd world. The other side to it is there's often we want more intelligence, we want more information, we never have enough. What are we doing to fill intelligence gaps? Can we actually identify some of the intelligence gaps and weaknesses and fill those in the process of doing work? I ran a big project with the Philadelphia Police Department on foot patrol. And one of the big failings, I don't mind admitting it, was that when those officers finished the foot patrols, we lost all that intelligence. These guys have been walking in these small footbeats for months. And when we moved them out, we lost all that knowledge and intelligence. We should have captured more of that. The P is for prevention. What are we doing? Things like gun buyback programs, do they work? Well, we got like 3 views. Yeah, I'm not sure. Yeah, but what are we doing for crime prevention? Okay. The prevention side, here's a way to think about prevention. If you want to think about whether it's a crime prevention more than enforcement, think about this. How would I try and reduce this problem if I had no police resources? If I had no police, what could I do? That gets you thinking about crime prevention. And it's really popular with police chiefs because it doesn't use their resources. If you want to think about crime prevention, just ask yourself that question. How would I tackle or reduce this problem if I had no police? The E is enforcement. You guys have got this covered, right? That's easy. Bread and butter stuff. And the R is reassurance. The public continue to feel that crime is going up, even when all the evidence suggests it's going down. Which is amazing, really, because the public continue to think every year that crime's gone up for the last 30 years. And it's pretty much tracked down since the 1990s with a few years post-COVID, post-George Floyd, when things went up. But what we end up with is trying to find a range of things to do. So if you're nominating a strategy, where can you get ideas from? So one of the things you can do is come to a fantastic conference like this, right? You can come to a meeting like this, you can attend a meeting, and you can either see a new idea in a panel session that you might want to try, or more often than not, right in the middle of breakfast when all you want to do is drink coffee and get over the hangover from last night, is just sit there and think of ideas while daydreaming, while some English guy stands on the deck and you go, what is he talking about? Okay? Either way, it's all good. What we really want you to do then is go away and try it. Try some of these ideas. And then evaluate it. You know, oh no, just celebrate success. Fuck it, that's where we're going to. That's right. What we want you to do when it comes to implementation is to at least do something that is not idealistic but realistic. And what am I talking about? Let me give you an analogy of the difference between being idealistic but possibly overly optimistic and realistic. I've been dating my partner now for some years now, 5, 6 years. And a woman, yeah. I know, snappy dress or English accent, that's always a fun reveal. But we've reached that stage in our relationship where we're having, we were at dinner the other night and we were saying, I just brought up, some of you may have had this conversation. There was that one person, that celebrity or somebody that you could have a one-night fling with. Like a little bit of an affair, a frisson, a brief liaison, a hookup, I believe the kids call it, that wouldn't be a relationship killer, right? You get that one, I believe you call it a hall pass, that one hall pass for that one celebrity. Who would that be? And I said to her, who would that be? And in about a tenth of a second, she went, oh, Ryan Reynolds. And I thought, yeah, I know, right? Now, I'll tell you what, like just about everybody else my age, I'm 58. And I thought for the vast majority of those 58 years that I was heterosexual, but that is a good-looking man. It's like, damn, I tell you what, he can turn a chap's head. And so I said, good choice, splendid choice, actually. And she says, what about you? And I said, well, how about your sister? I mean, she's coming into town next weekend. I mean, do you see that gulf between idealistic but unattainable and realistic, but I'm really looking forward to the weekend. So, and this is where you can get a little bit distracted by some of the things that you can come to conferences and you hear, about these ideas. You think, well, that's just, we can't do that. Try and implement what you can realistically, rather than fail, bring in some idealized model that you can't sustain. It's not going to work in your area. Okay, go with what you can do realistically is better than failing at something that we clearly didn't have a chance to fly. We use that. We use a varying ranges when we look at research models. So, for example, this is a horrible chart, but at least it's in color. We have different levels of scientific study. At the very top, we have randomized control in green, top level randomized control trials. Have you heard of these? Like medical trials, RCTs, we run them in policing. They're very difficult to run. I've managed to run about a dozen of them within policing, and that's in 20-something plus years in academia. They're very difficult to organize and set up and run. Okay, but they are kind of like the gold standard. Now, if you can do that, that's fantastic. Consider that there's your, anything above the bar is good. But if you can get right up to the top and do randomized trials, then, there you go. That's, there you go. You're in Ryan Reynolds territory there, okay? But if you can do something at 3 or 4, something that's promising, that's good too, right? So this level number 3, that's if you've got, a couple of districts or a police beats. If you can try something in one and have a comparable one to see what would happen if, business as usual, and compare the two, do something in this one, don't do it in this one, that's level 3. That's great. We like that kind of stuff. It's not Ryan Reynolds, but we'll call it Ryan Gosling. It's good enough, right? Okay, if you can do Ryan-level research, we're in good shape, okay? Now, once you start to get below the bar, things get a bit more interesting, okay? If you're at the stage where, yeah, you could do, you did a one-off measure, or we do before and afterwards. We did it in the whole city, and afterwards crime came down. Well, crime could have come down anyway. But at least you tried something. You tried something new. It's interesting. You're doing Danny DeVito research at that point, right? If, by the way, you go out and you find a vendor and they tell you that their software program works and you actually bloody well believe them, then more fool you. Or worse, you get some quote from a police chief or an academic in the paper, and that's enough for you to start expending resources. Well, at that point, you're in Gary Busey territory and thinking, good luck, all right? But if you can do Ryan-level research, we're in good shape, okay? And there is a lot of Ryan-level research out there around policing. Do you know, you happy that you know what works, what doesn't, right? You come to conferences, yeah? Yeah, a few people nodding, good. Well, get your phone out. We'll see if you can put your money where your mouth is. I'm going to ask you about long-term crime reduction and what works or not. So, yeah, scan that QR code. It's not going to make your phone blow up, by the way, okay? Well, at least I don't think so. Who knows? But when you scan that, you should, after a few minutes, once you click on the menti.com thing, you should start. Have you started to get a list of 10 things? Somebody tell me yes or no. Yes? Fantastic. All right. Now, in academic research, there's tons of things we don't know whether they work or not, right? We just haven't studied them. You guys do them, but we haven't studied them. But there's that QR code's off to the side there if you need it. But there are 10 things on this list. And the question I have for you is, scientific evidence is pretty clear on all 10 of these. We know whether they work or whether they don't. So there's nothing wishy-washy in the middle. These are 10 things that we're pretty clear as like, yeah, these work, yeah, this doesn't work. All right, so there's nothing in the middle. Which of these things work? Tick the things that you think work. Rapid police response, if we reduce the amount of time it takes to reach a court to get to locations, do we see measurable crime reduction if we reduce the amount of time it takes officers to reach calls for service? If we go and arrest street corner drug market, people on street corner drug markets, do we get long-term crime reduction from just doing street rips? Hotspots policing. DARE, does anybody have the DARE program in your town, city? No? Anybody been through a DARE program as a kid? You, madam, good for you. Do you do drugs now? No, okay, just check, nearly fell for it. You're like, yeah, oh, yeah, I nearly caught you, right? Focused deterrence. I think you've had some presentations of that. If you do school peer group counseling for bullies, if kids get together and tell the bully they're a bully, does that stop them bullying? Crackdowns, do short-term crackdowns lead to longer-term crime reduction gains? If we take kids into the middle of the wilderness for some strange reason, bring the little bastards back again, does that reduce their level of criminal activity? Gun buyback programs, very popular. Do you do gun buyback programs? How many people have got gun buyback programs in their jurisdiction? Eh? Like 2 people. Thank you, sir. Good for you. Does it work? Yeah, okay. Get the app. See, arresting domestic abusers. Let's see where we are. Oh, look at the votes coming in. You can vote for more than 131 people in the room have voted already. I feel like an auctioneer. 140 people's votes are in. This is fantastic. There we go. 143 mandatory arrest programs for domestic abuse. 144. There we go. Look at that. I didn't want to show you this too early. I wanted to get your votes in. You can vote for more than one. Fascinating. All right, 150 people, we'll call it about that. There we go. So rapid police response, hotspots policing, focused deterrence, school peer group counseling. I wonder if that was up because I talked about it. Arresting domestic abusers. Not a lot of love for the wilderness programs or the gun buybacks. Okay, would you like to know the answers? Okay, good. So the answer is, well, before we get there, think for a moment, where did you get your view on what you clicked? Was it because you read the research? Or is it because when you were coming up in the job, there was some sergeant that you liked that said, oh yeah, I teach in the DARE program, it's a really good program. Most of where we get our ideas from don't come from the scientific literature. So when we think about implementation, we're failing already because we're often reinventing the wheel, whereas the wheel has been evaluated a lot. One of the starting points to a really successful implementation is starting to implement things that we know work. So the scientific literature is one of the places that you go to. This is why I have problems with how many places run their ComStat meetings or equivalent, is that we get a new problem on the screen, and the officer in charge of the area has to come up with a solution there and then, because that's what looks good in the meeting. It looks dynamic. Okay, I was in the army for a bit. There's pointing. You point with the whole fist, because with your finger is rude. There's lots of this, very dynamic, driven. Yeah. Being decisive. Being decisive in the minute when it's a shame, because if you'd held the decision off for a week, you could have gone and done some research to actually find out whether the thing you just said you were going to invest everybody's time, money, energy, and effort into would actually bloody work. So yeah, the research is out there. So if we're talking about implementation, before we even think about how well we implement it, let's start picking things that we know work. Let's do less of what doesn't work and more of what does. If you're wondering what does work, there are the votes that you guys came up with. And the things that work are, well, that works. And that works. And that's it. All of the rest of these things have been evaluated extensively and found not to have any long-term crime prevention benefit. How well did you do? Yeah, all the people who voted for everything except for hotspots policing and focused deterrence are going, shit, I'm going to go get coffee. Now, here's why it's important. We have democratized to some degree all this knowledge. It's a little bit like the Bible, right? Okay, if you come here 20 years ago, if I was talking to you guys 20 years ago, and I was trying to tell you where the scientific literature is and the knowledge is, it would all be behind paywalls and academic journal articles, which is like reading the Bible in Latin, right? Nowadays, we've translated the Bible into English. Okay, nowadays, the academic research is available in English. And here's why it's important for your starting point to know what works and what doesn't. Because if you don't know what works and what doesn't, and you don't know what to implement, other people are going to start beating you up with this. And if you want that to be a little bit scary, here's Councilmember Caban from, I think, the Queens District in New York. Not a big fan of the police, as I understand it. And this is from a Zoom meeting where she is having a conversation with former Commissioner Sewell in the NYPD. I'm not going to... this is how people, if they want to criticize police, are starting to use the research evidence.
I want to direct the first questions that I have for the commissioner. You testified that, quote, you will continue to use science. So yes or no, are you familiar with the National Academy of Sciences?
Yes, I am familiar with that. I'm sorry, your question, yes.
Okay. So the National Academy of Sciences was established by an act of Congress, for those who don't know, in 1863. It was charged with providing independent, objective advice to the nation on matters related to science and technology. Scientists are elected by their peers to membership in the NAS for outstanding contributions to research. The NAS is committed to furthering science in America. The National Academy of Sciences reviewed almost 4 decades of research on broken windows policing and concluded that policing tactics focused on low-level arrests, quote, generate small to no impacts on crime, end quote. The Center for Evidence-Based Crime Policy also issued a report finding that, quote, aggressive order maintenance strategies, end quote, did not reduce crime. So why are you adopting a strategy that decades of experience in research shows doesn't work?
So why are you adopting a strategy that decades of experience in research shows doesn't work? Wow. Should be a little worrying. Didn't mean to scare you over breakfast. Sorry about that. If I wanted to scare you, I'd provide more of the oatmeal. Now, I'm not going to show you the answer. The commissioner answered the question perfectly reasonably. I'm far more interested in the question. That is the question from somebody who, whether you like her or not, has done the research or has had somebody to do the research. Okay? That should be a warning to all of us who have a few more years left in the job, is that we can't get away with just doing the same old shit we've been doing before, because the knowledge about what doesn't work is well and truly out there. And it is very accessible and it's easy to get hold of. And people who want to criticize police are now using it. So yeah, be aware that when it comes to picking a strategy, nominating a strategy, the good starting point is, let's find out what's worked. And I don't mean what's worked just in your neighboring institution. You know, give Steve a ring across the road and say, hey, what do you guys do? Okay, because Steve don't know the literature either, right? Figure out the scientific literature. It's not scientific anymore. There are a bunch of websites. If you go to reducingcrime.com, I list a few websites that you can easily tap into that explain some of what works and what doesn't. The model then, when it comes to actually deploying it, that's when we get really into the implementation side. And this is where we care about, are we actually doing something different? Are we getting outputs for what we're outcomes? This is outcomes from our outcomes. Sorry, I need more coffee. Thank you for the, thanks for the whiskey. So I did a project in Philadelphia where we had predictive policing using little grids, and we would predict these crime grids, and we would have officers go and patrol the grids. How much time would you expect the officer, very small grids, like 500 feet by 500 feet, pretty much a block and a half. How much time would you expect the officers to be in those grids over an 8-hour shift? It's kind of a rhetorical question, right? But this gets to the issue of, was my project implemented as we planned it? And as much as anything else, this is what you guys need to do. It's not enough to write a memo or an order in your office and then go, well, there we go, problem solved. Okay, that's like forming a squad. Okay? You actually have to make sure that if you're wanting people to do something different, they are actually doing something different. Okay? If you're spending more money on overtime, then you expect to see something in return for that. Don't just assume that it will happen. So I had people sitting there, I had my graduate students and fellow researchers sit in the back of police cars for over 100 ride-alongs in Philadelphia. We took a note of where everybody was, in the majority of their time every 15 minutes. And over an 8-hour shift from 8 p.m. to 4 in the afternoon, the day shift looking at property crime, they were in anything that's in red, either color of red, they were actually in the grids. And I consider that pretty good. They actually were patrolling the grids. Anything that's in yellow means that they were outside of the grids, moving from one grid to another or dealing with incidents. Anything that's blue means they were on break, and you can see the break lunch or at the police station. And anything that's in gray shows you how often Philadelphia Police Department cars break down. If you put 300,000 miles on a car with no hubcaps, guess what? It can't last an 8-hour shift. Interestingly enough, when we went from property crime, we could get these guys out to 8 o'clock in the morning. When we went to the late shift, looking at violent crime from 6 p.m. to 2 o'clock in the morning, it was harder to get them out of the police station for the first 45 minutes, but they were still working later. You see the difference? So, does that, I mean, there isn't an answer to this question, but at least when people say, hey, when you did the predictive policing, we got a reduction in property crime. We got a reduction in vehicle crime by having uniform patrols in dedicated cars going to grids where the software was predicting an increased likelihood of vehicle crime. At least when we did that, we can say, what did you do? I can actually say, well, we know how often they were in the cars. We know how often they were actually there. If you've got GPS, it's great. But at some point, figure out, are you getting what you spent your money on? Why do we care about implementation? Well, here's why. It's a good picture, Tony. Good picture. So why do we care about implementation? Here's why we care about implementation. Because implementation is part of being successful. All right, in the top here, if your objectives were achieved, you actually achieved the outcome, congratulations. If it's in this green box, congratulations. You achieved your outcome and you implemented it as you planned. Go home, tea and medals, you've earned your money for that day. Tell the boss that Jerry Ratcliffe said you can go home. All right? You have earned your pay for that day because you implemented it as you planned and you got what you wanted. Even if you're in this no box, that's okay. You discovered one of the things that doesn't work, and that's still useful, right?